I am not sure where to start my story. My name is Ryan and I am a jet engine mechanic that works with the major US-based airline. I am also an airframe and power plant mechanic. I served almost 12 years in the U.S. Navy based in Hawaii Oceana in Virginia Beach, as well as 2 tours of duty at Naval Air Station in Jacksonville. After my discharge, I applied for and got my current job. I am also a private pilot and enjoy flying in a rental plane. I met my now ex-wife Gail at a party in Virginia Beach while I was stationed at Oceana. Because of the nature of my job, I only went out on one deployment. I was needed ashore. Gail worked as a server in a local Virginia Beach restaurant. And to be honest, I was in there a lot just to see Gail, and I would go spend weekends that she was not working down on the North Carolina Outer Banks. At some point, I got orders for Hawaii, and about 2 weeks before I was set to take some leave, Gail notified me that she was pregnant. I went to see the Master Chief about my issue and he told me that he could not delay my orders and I had to deal with this issue before I left. Then as I was about to leave his office, I got told this is what happens when you don't keep that zipper zipped. 2 weeks. I called my folks and told them they were going to be grandparents and soon to have a daughter-in-law. I asked Gail to marry me. When I think back on it all today, I know I messed up really bad. I could have handled this pregnancy differently. My own father told me not to marry her, to have her come live with them and they will handle her medical care. Stubborn. Me had to marry Gail. Here is where I should add that my father is black and my mother is white. Gail is 100% white. My father, before he retired, worked for a large candy maker and my mom is a nurse. After Gail and I got married, we made the move to Hawaii. Then almost 6 months later, my daughter was born. I knew that little girl was mine because she looked just like my mother as she got older. She reminded me more and more of my mom. Gail found a job near where I was stationed and we lived a good life until I got orders back to the mainland to Jacksonville. Then I finished my 3rd enlistment. I was told I could make a better living working for the airline. So I chose to get out. This really angered Gail, who by then had a son. So we moved to where I now live. Gail went back to school and got her teaching certificate and got a job working in a local high school teaching English. By this time, both Gail and I were in our 30s and had 2 growing kids. I was working mostly nights, working on aircraft that needed to be ready for the next morning. Many checks and lots of paperwork. I will always remember the day my world changed forever because the FAA and Boeing had released what is called an AD, short for Airworthiness Directive, that affected several of the aircraft. My airline used it, took an hour to finish, and then I had to get the AD inspected done. I then walked into the break room to eat. I attempted to call my house landline and got no answer. This was about 4 in the morning and Gail had a phone right beside her bed. I let it go, finished my meal and went back to work. Then a while later walked out to my car and went home. Gail's car was parked in the driveway. I was still bothered by Gail not answering the phone. So on a lark, I felt on the hood of her car and felt it was warm, not hot but just warm enough. I knew it had been driven within the past 2 hours. So I opened my door to find Gail in the kitchen wearing her nightgown, making breakfast. I was tired and not in the mood to play detective. So I went to bed. I was done for 3 days. It was not going to work that night. So I got up about 3 hours later and Gail had left for work by then. My daughter was in the 2nd grade by then. And my son was at daycare. I walked outside and seeing one of my neighbors and we spoke for a while about the mess. The city was making curbs on the road edges. This neighbor is retired. But I knew he also got up early to feed his cat and just asked him if he knew what time my wife got home this morning. He said, "Ryan, she pulled up about 45 minutes before you did." I just stood there wondering what the heck. I went back inside and started thinking about what I had discovered that evening before we ate dinner. I asked my daughter if she enjoyed her adventure last night. Gay's face looked as if all the blood drained from it. My son said that he spent the night with Helen, who was one of Gail's friends. Gay did say, "Yes, I forgot to tell you that Mary was not feeling well. So I stayed most of the night with her. I still smelled a rat but dropped it and went back to my life." Then two things happened. Gail told me she was pregnant again and I started to get sick. I started to get dizzy a lot. I would develop headaches so bad. I was unable to function. I was also having problems with nausea. This went on for almost 3 months. I finally took some time off work and went to see my family doctor. He gave me an examination and said he could not find anything wrong. Still, I stayed sick. Finally, I went back to my doctor and this time he had my blood tested. One thing was found to be abnormal and that was my kidney function. My doctor scheduled me for some outpatient testing. About a week later, I went home and laid down on the couch, then got up and was looking for another item. When I discovered one of those bottles you see football players drinking Gatorade out of, I opened the lid and discovered antifreeze. I called my doctor and spoke to one of his nurses and asked her to ask the doctor if antifreeze will cause my symptoms. Then about a minute later, the doctor was on the phone asking me, why was I asking? I told him I just found antifreeze in my kitchen. His next words were almost screaming when he said, "Get to the ASAP. I will meet you there." However, I made a bad mistake. I left that bottle on the counter. Gail must have found it and removed it from the house. I later found no traces of antifreeze in my house. Anyway, when I got to I was given an IV and some medicine to take. I was also admitted overnight. The next day I was still weak but felt a lot better. My doctor called the police department and before I left the hospital, a policeman came into my room and asked me about my relationship with my wife. Then he took me home. I got her to come get my car. Gail was home when we came into the house. This was when I discovered the bottle was no longer in the house and the large container that had my tea in, it was also missing. Nothing was in the trash. My doctor certified I had ingested antifreeze but there was no trace of it anywhere in or around my house. The cop left. I went upstairs to pack because by this time I knew Gail was trying to kill me because I work for the airline. I was able to fly space available to visit my parents and other family. 2 weeks eating my mom's food and I was 100% better. I told my parents about finding the antifreeze and what the doctor had found. They agreed I needed to see an attorney. I also hired a private investigator and I also paid a police detective to go through my home on his own time to search for signs of antifreeze. He found none. The private investigator on the other hand found Gay with her AP. Gail's AP owns a tune-up shop in the town where we lived. The private investigator called Gail at his home several times. I suspect this is where Gail was that morning when she would not answer the phone. This AP has at least 2 ex-wives that I know of. I have no idea how many kids he has fathered. The private investigator had no problems getting the photos. They were open about everything during our divorce. Gail admitted to the affair. The lieutenant that was over. The detectives told me since they can't find any traces of antifreeze, there was no proof. Gail was attempting to kill me. I then just resigned myself to the fact I was getting a divorce. I filed for a divorce about 2 months after getting out of the hospital. I lost everything when it was all over. All I had was my clothes, some electronics and my car since Gail had a good job. My alimony was low and only lasted 3 years. I got a room in an extended stay hotel for almost 2 months during the divorce. I was so scared of Gail that I would not allow her near me. My attorney told me how to remove Gail from my life insurance policy but protect my kids. So I did just that after this. I stopped worrying about Gail trying to kill me. Then the day came. Gail had her child. The baby was 100% white. I knew when I seen it that it was not mine. I did ask for a paternity test. I got it. And yes, the little girl was not mine. My attorney handled all of that to protect me with regard to supporting her. By this time, I was free of Gail. The thing is, karma has a way of slapping you off that high horse. And with Gail, It was no exception. About 6 months after the divorce, while drunk, Gail admitted to the poisoning. She was hurt by several people. I got a knock on my door that next day, and it was a detective informing me that Gail had been arrested. The first thing I did was get my kids in a safe place. Sadly, Gail was good enough to clean up all the evidence. So the prosecutor offered her a plea bargain that if she would plead to reckless endangerment, she could keep it a misdemeanor and she would only do about 90 days in jail. Gail took the plea as soon as I discovered Gay was in jail. I moved quickly to get all of the facts of that case in front of the same judge that was over our divorce. He agreed to reopen it. Gail was allowed to be present via a closed-circuit feed. The judge granted my request for 100% custody of my kids. And Gail's folks got the baby. When Gail got out, she started to reopen the case to get the kids back. To this day, she still has not stopped trying. She can't see the kids unsupervised and it is messing with her. Gail finally married her AP and had 2 more kids with him. I keep thinking, will Gail attempt the same crap again? As I think about these events, I feel lucky to be alive. My world is my kids. I admit I spoil them, but nowhere near what my parents do. I also was able to get transferred back to my home state where my parents still live. I asked my attorney to make sure it was okay with the court. Gail fought me tooth and nail, but I did win. I am still single. My old friends stay after me to meet girls. But these days, after Gail's actions, I just can't make that commitment. I should add one last thing to my story that will make it complete. Why was Gail attempting to kill me? I spoke to the detective that interviewed her and he said she would not speak to him or sign any confessions. I had a $500,000 life insurance policy. I still think Gay simply wanted the money as well as getting me out of her way because Gail won't talk about it. I will never know the full story. I do know this though. I looked evil right in his eyes and survived. I did see a therapist several times and the therapist said most likely Gail has a SPD.